Welcome to Scoli Sleep Stories. Before we begin, take a moment to get comfortable, let the day soften around you, and settle in for a calm documentary made for curious minds. If these stories help you rest, learn, or simply enjoy a quieter part of the day, please consider liking this episode and subscribing to the channel. Now, when you are ready, let us begin. Chapter 1. A small object in the hand. Somewhere near you, in a quiet room at the close of the day, there is very likely a spoon. It may be resting in a drawer among its companions, or lying beside a bowl where the last of the evening light gathers. Perhaps it sits on the edge of a saucer, still warm from a cup of tea. Wherever it is, it waits without impatience, as spoons tend to do. It asks nothing of us. And yet if we look at it slowly, this small and familiar object begins to reveal a story far longer and more varied than its plain appearance might suggest. Consider the spoon simply as it is. Its surface may be smooth and pale, catching a soft point of light along its curve. If you lift it, you may feel the cool weight of it settle into your palm. Then, after a moment, the coolness begins to fade as the metal takes on a little of the warmth of your hand. Turn it gently, and the reflected light bends and slides across its rounded face. The room stretches into a curved and gleaming miniature. Tap the spoon lightly against a ceramic bowl, and there's that familiar sound, a small, clear note that fades almost as soon as it appears. Most of the spoons we know share two principal parts. There's the bowl, the hollow at one end that gathers and holds, and there's the handle, the length that leads back toward the fingers. That is nearly all there is to the basic idea. A small vessel joined to a handle, a tiny portable bowl made to travel between a larger vessel and the hand. From this simple principle, an enormous variety has grown. The bowl of a spoon may be deep, made to cradle liquid, or shallow and broad. It may be nearly round, oval, pointed, or long and narrow. Some bowls are shaped for soup, some for sugar, some for medicine, and some for the particular curves of a fruit or serving dish. The handle changes as well. A short handle suits a spoon meant for eating, held close to the food it carries. A long handle belongs to a spoon meant for reaching into a tall glass, a deep jar, or a cooking pot. A broad handle may sit comfortably against the palm. A narrow one may feel light between the fingers. There is no single perfect spoon shape, because there is no single task that every spoon must perform. A spoon can scoop, of course, but it can also stir, drawing slow circles through something warm until separate ingredients disappear into the whole. It can mix and blend. It can measure, dividing a larger amount into careful portions, carrying food from a shared dish to a waiting plate. A spoon can help a cook taste the progress of a simmering pot. It can offer food to a child. It can administer medicine, though modern liquid medicines are better measured with tools designed for accuracy. In other places and other times, small scoops have handled ointments, powders, cosmetics, incense, and substances set aside for ceremony. The same modest form has quietly performed a great many tasks. It is tempting to imagine that the first spoon was inspired by something already close at hand. Perhaps it echoed a cupped palm, with fingers drawn together to hold a little water. Perhaps it copied a shell, rinsed smooth by the sea and hollow enough to lift whatever needed lifting. These are useful comparisons. They remind us how naturally the shape of a small vessel appears in the world. But we should hold them lightly. We cannot prove that a hand or a shell directly inspired the first spoon made on purpose. There is no securely known inventor of the spoon. There is no single birthplace and no exact date. Spoon-like tools probably arose independently in many places, whenever people encountered a need for a small scoop and found a material that could answer it. Even the English word carries a trace of old material within it. The word spoon comes from the Old English word spone, meaning a chip or splinter of wood. Over long stretches of time, that word for a piece of wood came to name the utensil we recognize today. This history hints at the importance of wooden spoons. It does not prove that every early spoon was made of wood. Still, the word allows us to imagine workshops long vanished, with thin curls of timber gathering beneath a blade and a hollow gradually appearing under patient hands. Today, several words gather around the spoon. We may speak of cutlery, placing knives, forks, and spoons beneath one name. In North America, we may say flatware, meaning the utensils laid upon a table. We may also reach for the word silverware, even when the objects contain no silver at all and are made from ordinary stainless steel. Language settles into habit, much as a familiar spoon settles into a familiar drawer. The spoon is so ordinary that it often disappears from our attention. We use it without considering its balance, its curve, or the many decisions hidden within its shape. Yet a spoon is also a quiet meeting place between material and need. Wood, bone, horn, ceramic, bronze, silver, steel, aluminum, and plastic have all been asked to take the same general form. Each material brings a different weight, sound, warmth, and texture. Wood touches pottery softly. Metal makes a light chime against ceramic. A polished silver bowl bends reflections. A plastic spoon may be nearly weightless. A long cooking spoon keeps a hand away from heat. Behind all of these variations lies a recurring action. Something is lifted, stirred, measured, tasted, portioned, served, or shared. So here the spoon rests, this small object in the hand. It is useful, humble, and easy to overlook. Yet if we follow its curve backward, past the machines that stamped it and the workshops that shaped it, past formal tables and modest kitchens, we come to a time before written records. No one wrote down who first lifted broth, softened grain, medicine, pigment, seeds, or water with a small hollow tool. Many of the earliest examples have disappeared completely. In that distant quiet, beside water, clay, bone, and freshly cut wood, the history of the spoon begins. Chapter 2. Before Written History. Long before anyone wrote down a recipe or made an inventory of household possessions, people were already reaching for objects that could scoop and carry. They may have needed to lift food from a vessel, gather a mouthful of softened grain, transfer seeds, mix pigment, or carry a small measure of something precious from one place to another. We cannot name the first person who shaped such a tool. We cannot point to one riverbank or valley and say that the spoon began there. This uncertainty is not merely a gap in the story. It is part of the story itself. The beginnings of spoon-like tools are scattered, ordinary, and largely unwritten. Such tools probably arose independently in many places, among communities separated by great distances. This becomes easier to imagine when we consider what the natural world already offers. There are shells cupped as smooth by water. There are gourds that dry into hard, hollow vessels. There are curved pieces of bark, lengths of horn, broad pieces of bone, and branches thick enough to be carved. Each material contains some possibility of scooping. Some could be used almost as they were found. A clean shell could hold a little water or loose material. A hollow gourd might serve as a dipper, bowl, or cup. A folded or naturally curved piece of bark could carry something light. Other materials invited more work. Wood could be cut, scraped, and hollowed. Bone could be ground and polished until its edges were smooth. Horn could be trimmed and shaped. A handle might be left as part of the same piece, or in some cases, a separate scoop could be fitted to something longer. Imagine a maker seated near a fire, turning a piece of wood in the hands. A blade moves along the grain, fine curls fall away, the hollow grows gradually, one careful stroke at a time. The tool does not yet have a name that we know, but its purpose is already clear to the person making it. Archaeologists have recovered prehistoric objects interpreted as spoons, scoops, or ladles. Some were made from bone or shell, others were shaped from stone or formed from pottery. Their survival gives us glimpses of activities that would otherwise have vanished. Yet interpretation is rarely simple. A small scoop tells us its size and shape, but not necessarily its work. It may have held food, it may have carried seeds, fat, pigment, medicine, or another substance. It may have been used in cooking, craft, personal care, or ceremony. Archaeologists examine what is called context. This means the place where an object was found, what surrounded it, and how it lay in relation to other remains. They may study scratches, polished areas, traces of wear, or residues left on a surface. They compare the object with better understood tools from other places and times. Even residue analysis cannot answer every question. It may reveal what substance touched an object without showing precisely how that object was used. A trace of fat, for example, does not tell us whether the scoop served food, prepared a material, or measured an ingredient. Often the most honest answer is not certainty, but a careful possibility. There is another reason our picture is incomplete. The materials most available for ordinary tools are often the least likely to survive. Wood, leather, gourd, basketry, and other organic materials gradually decay. Unless they are protected by unusual conditions, they soften, break apart, and return to the soil. A wooden object may survive in a place that remains extremely dry, permanently frozen, deeply waterlogged, or poor in oxygen, but such preservation is uncommon. As a result, surviving collections may give too much importance to stone, ceramic, bone, ivory, and metal. These durable materials remain visible, while countless wooden and gourd utensils disappear. The lost objects may once have been far more common than the surviving ones. A wooden spoon could be made from a nearby branch, repaired or replaced without much ceremony, and used until it split or wore thin. It might never have been treated as something worth recording. In this way, ordinary life becomes quieter in the archaeological record than wealth, ritual, or durable craftsmanship. The development of pottery changed cooking in many places, though not everywhere at the same time. A clay vessel that could withstand heat made it easier to boil grains, legumes, roots, and other foods. Broths and porridges could simmer. Ingredients could soften together over a fire. Picture steam rising from a clay pot. Inside is a meal that is neither entirely solid nor entirely liquid. A ladle passes slowly through it, disturbing the surface. A smaller scoop lifts a portion to taste. Foods like these are compatible with spoons and ladles. Such tools would be useful for stirring, serving, tasting, and eating. But it would be too simple to say that soup or pottery invented the spoon. Many foods can be eaten with fingers, bread, cups, or bowls. A broth may be drunk directly. A thick grain dish may be gathered by hand. A communal ladle may serve several people without anyone using an individual eating spoon. Pottery, agriculture, and utensil customs followed different paths in different regions. They did not appear everywhere at once, and they did not create the same habits in every community. The history of the spoon is therefore not a straight line from one invention to another. It is a pattern of repeated solutions. People encountered liquid, loose grain, softened food, medicine, pigment, or other materials. They noticed that a hollow object could lift them. Then they shaped whatever was available. A shell was rinsed clean, a gourd was dried, bone was polished by repeated handling, wood was carved while still fresh, clay was pressed into a small bowl and hardened by fire. Most of these objects are gone. Their makers left no names. Their exact purposes remain uncertain. Yet the recurring idea is visible through what survives. A small vessel, sometimes joined to a handle made to gather and carry. From the many lost tools of prehistory, we now move toward objects that endure more clearly. Stone, ceramic, bronze, bone, ivory, and silver carry us into early cities and written worlds, where spoons become easier to see, though never entirely easy to understand. Chapter 3. Spoons of the Ancient World. When we enter the ancient world, the spoon becomes a little more visible, though it still reaches us only in fragments. Now there are small scoops of stone, handles of bronze, bowls shaped from bone, and delicate forms carved from ivory. Some survive because their materials were durable. Others remain because they were placed in protected settings or considered valuable enough to preserve. Even here, we must move gently. A spoon-like object can show us its shape, but it does not always reveal its purpose. Let us begin in ancient Egypt, beside the slow green ribbon of the Nile. Surviving Egyptian spoons and small scoops were made from wood, bone, stone, ivory, and metal. Some are simple in form, others are highly decorated. Among the elaborate examples are handles and bowls shaped with swimmers, plants, animals, or human figures. Lotus blossoms and papyrus forms appear. A carved figure may seem to stretch along the handle, joining decoration and function in one carefully balanced object. These pieces show considerable skill, but they should not be treated as typical of every household. Many ornate Egyptian examples are associated with cosmetics, scented ointments, perfume ingredients, offerings, or ceremonial settings, rather than ordinary dining. A tiny scoop might have lifted a fragrant salve. Another may have measured a powdered ingredient or held a substance connected with worship. Plain household spoons were less likely to be preserved collected, or placed in protected settings. What survives is not always what was most common. Durable, beautiful, and valuable objects often speak more loudly than everyday wooden tools. Some Egyptian spoons have been found in tombs, yet finding an object in a tomb does not prove that it was made only for burial or used only in ritual. Tombs could contain possessions connected with daily life, signs of status, cherished objects, and goods intended as provision for the afterlife. The location gives us important context, but not always one certain answer. Moving eastward into Mesopotamia and neighboring regions, archaeologists have found small scoops, ladles, and spoon-like objects made from pottery, shell, bone, ivory, and metal. These were societies with complex kitchens and systems of administration. Written records describe grain, oil, ingredients, and prepared foods. Surviving recipes reveal rich culinary traditions. Even so, matching a particular scoop to a particular dish is difficult. A small object may have served domestic work, food preparation, medicine, cosmetics, or worship. A ladle may have dipped into a cooking vessel. A tiny scoop may have measured a precious substance. Without strong evidence from context, more than one interpretation remains possible. Now let the scene shift toward the shores and hills of ancient Greece. Ancient Greeks knew spoons and ladles and used them when the food or task called for them. Yet the spoon was only one tool among many. Fingers, bread, cups, bowls, knives, and other utensils all had their places. Bread might gather sauce, a cup might bring liquid directly to the mouth, a ladle could transfer food from a cooking pot or serving vessel. Small scoops could also belong to medicine or cosmetics. Customs differed across periods, regions, households, and social settings. There was no single Greek table that represented every meal. Then we come to Rome, where several named spoon forms appear in the surviving record. One was the cochlear, a small spoon often made with a narrow or pointed handle. Its name is related to the Latin word cochlea, meaning snail. The pointed end may have helped to extract food from shells. The spoon was also associated with food such as eggs, although its uses were not necessarily limited to one dish. Imagine a slender silver handle resting between the fingers, with a small bowl at one end and a narrow point at the other. It is a compact tool, combining more than one possible use. The ligula was generally larger, with a broader bowl. It could carry a fuller portion and represents another Roman solution to the varied textures of food. Roman spoons survive in silver, bronze, bone, and other materials. A refined silver spoon might belong to a wealthy household and be counted among valuable possessions. A bronze example may now carry a greenish surface layer formed through age and chemical change. This layer is called patina. Patina is not simply dirt. It is a surface that develops as metal reacts slowly with its surroundings. It can soften the appearance of bronze, giving it the dark green or brown tones now familiar in museums. But museum displays can distort the past if we imagine that every Roman table shone with silver and bronze. Ordinary people may have used wooden or bone spoons, shared serving tools, or no individual spoon at all, depending on the food and setting. Carved wood, touched by oil and hands, would rarely survive as well as silver. A plain utensil could be used for years and then disappear completely, while an elegant metal spoon endured. The same caution applies to ivory. Ivory was historically used for fine utensils and decorative objects, but it came from animals. We can acknowledge the craftsmanship without romanticizing the source of the material. Across Egypt, Mesopotamia, Greece, and Rome, the spoon appears in many settings. It belongs to kitchens and dining, but also to medicine, cosmetics, ceremony, and worship. It may be plain or ornate, personal or shared, precious or replaceable. The word provenance is sometimes used when studying such objects. Provenance means the documented origin and ownership history of an item. Good provenance can help explain where an object came from and how it moved through collections. Without it, even a beautiful spoon may hold more uncertainty than its polished surface suggests. Still, the surviving forms allow us to see familiar gestures. A ladle dips beneath the surface of a pot. A tiny scoop holds scented ointment. Lamplight glimmers along a silver handle. A broader spoon lifts something soft from a dish. As materials, foods, and artistic styles moved between ports, roads, and markets, dining customs also changed. Yet similar spoon forms could arise independently, wherever people encountered similar needs. With that thought, we leave the ancient Mediterranean and river valleys and follow a wider path across Asia and along the many routes where spoons, chopsticks, hands, bread bowls, and ladles have long existed side by side. Chapter 4: Across Asia and Along Trade Routes. As our attention travels across Asia, following old roads, rivers, and sea lanes, we find not one history of the spoon, but many. Asia contains an immense variety of food cultures. No single custom can stand for them all. Practices differ across regions, periods, households, religions, social groups, and occasions. Even within one home, the tool chosen may change from one dish to the next. Food texture matters. A clear broth invites a cupped vessel. Thick porridge settles comfortably into a deep spoon. Rice may be gathered with fingers, lifted with a spoon, or managed with chopsticks, depending on local practice and preparation. Long noodles call for a tool that can grip and lift. Dumplings, curries, dairy dishes, grains, and shared stews each encourage different combinations of utensils. Hands, bread, chopsticks, knives, spoons, cups, bowls, and ladles are not stages on a ladder of progress. They are answers to different foods and different ideas about eating well. In China, ancient sites have yielded spoons made from ceramic, bone, bronze, and other materials. Such spoons were useful for grains, porridges, soups, and broths. Over long periods, chopsticks became increasingly important, yet they did not simply replace spoons. The two tools could serve different parts of the same meal. Chopsticks handled solid morsels with precision, while spoons remained useful for liquid and loose food. Traditional Chinese soup spoons often have relatively deep bowls and short handles, though shapes vary by region and period. Their form pairs naturally with a ceramic bowl. The spoon can rest against the curve of the vessel, its own bowl holding a small portion of broth. When glazed ceramic touches glazed ceramic, the sound is brighter than wood against pottery. There is a small chime, clear and brief, before the meal continues. In Korea, the pairing of spoon and chopsticks is deeply established. The modern collective term sujo is formed from words for spoon and chopsticks, bringing the two together in a single expression. Korean spoons are often metal and long-handled, especially in modern settings. A spoon may be used for rice and soup, while chopsticks handle side dishes. Actual practice varies by household and occasion, as living customs always do. Historical forms and materials also changed across dynasties and social groups. A dynasty is a succession of rulers from the same family or ruling line, and each period may leave its own changes in material, form, and etiquette. Picture a long metal spoon laid parallel to chopsticks. The spoon catches a muted point of light. Rice grains gather within its curve. Neither utensil replaces the other. Together they answer the meal before them. In Japan, chopsticks became central to many kinds of dining. Even so, spoons have long had particular uses. They have been used for medicines, tea preparation, desserts, and more. Now let us pause for a moment and dishes influenced by other cuisines. In customary miso soup service, the bowl may be raised toward the mouth, while chopsticks help with solid ingredients. This reduces the need for an individual soup spoon at that moment. It does not mean that Japan historically had no spoons. A bowl itself can perform some of the work that a spoon performs elsewhere. The choice depends on the food, the vessel, and the custom. Across South Asia, eating with the fingers has long-standing cultural and practical importance in many communities. Touch can help combine food, judge temperature, and bring a carefully formed portion to the mouth. This practice exists alongside spoons and ladles, not in the absence of them. Spoons have served cooking, liquids, medicines, particular dishes, and ritual offerings. Ladles move food from cooking vessels to serving bowls. Metalworking traditions produced utensils in bronze, brass, copper alloys, silver, and later, stainless steel. Customs vary greatly by religion, region, class, food, and historical period. No one description can represent the whole of South Asia. Across Central Asia, soups, broths, grain dishes, and dairy foods have supported traditions of wooden and metal spoons. A wooden ladle may float briefly upon broth before a hand takes hold of it again. A metal spoon may travel easily with a person moving between camp and settlement. In Southeast Asia, utensil customs are equally varied. Modern Thai meals often use a spoon as the main utensil, with a fork helping to place food onto it. This convention became prominent through relatively recent changes in courtly and urban dining. It should not be projected unchanged into the distant past. In the Philippines and elsewhere, spoon and fork dining reflects local practices as well as colonial history. Colonial influence means change associated with control or settlement by an outside power. Its effects differed from place to place and were never merely a simple exchange of objects. Trade did carry materials, foods, artistic styles, and dining fashions. Ceramics traveled, metals moved, new dishes entered unfamiliar kitchens, but not every similar spoon shape must have traveled along a trade route. Independent invention is often just as plausible. A deep spoon suits broth in more than one part of the world. A long handle reaches into a deep pot wherever such pots are used. A broad bowl gathers rice without requiring one culture to copy another. So the history here is a wide weave rather than a single thread. There is glazed ceramic cooling beside a bowl. There is lacquer, a durable finish built up in thin layers, reflecting a muted point of light. There is a long metal spoon beside chopsticks, a wooden ladle over soup, and rice settling into a polished curve. Each scene belongs to its own place and custom. From these broad routes and varied kitchens, we now draw closer to the tables, travel pouches, household stores, and workshops of the medieval world. There, a spoon could be simple enough to carve from a branch, useful enough to carry on a journey, or valuable enough to be written into an inventory and preserved for another generation. Chapter 5. Medieval Tables. Let us move into the long stretch of centuries called the medieval period and step quietly into a room where a meal is being prepared. It may be a timbered hall, a modest rural home, an inn, or a monastery refectory with rows of plain benches. The light is soft and moving. It comes from a candle, a low fire, or the last of the day through a narrow window. On the table there may be bread, a bowl, a knife, and a spoon. This scene could belong to many places across Europe, the Middle East, and neighboring regions connected by trade. Yet no two such tables would be exactly alike. There was no single medieval dining custom. Practices varied from one century to another, from town to countryside, from court to monastery, and from a wealthy household to a modest one. The meal served at an inn differed from one served in a military camp. A religious institution followed routines unlike those of a family home. In much of medieval Europe, knives and spoons were familiar eating tools. Forks also existed, especially in some places and social settings, but they did not become ordinary individual utensils everywhere at the same time. Their spread was gradual and uneven. A diner might use a knife, bread, fingers, and a spoon within the same meal. The knife could cut firmer food. Bread might gather sauce or absorb broth. Fingers, used according to the manners of the time, could handle suitable pieces. The spoon lifted pottage, softened grains, broth, or other food that was difficult to manage with a blade. These methods were companions rather than competitors. Medieval people were not uniformly careless or without manners. Etiquette existed, though it differed from modern etiquette. People had expectations about cleanliness, sharing, order, and respectful conduct. Those expectations changed according to place and social setting. Some meals included shared serving vessels. A platter or bowl might sit within reach of several diners. In other settings, people had separate bowls or dishes. It would be inaccurate to say that everyone always ate from one communal vessel. A trencher might form part of the setting. In one historical use, a trencher was a thick slice of bread serving as a plate-like surface. It could absorb sauces and juices during the meal. In later usage, the word could also refer to a plate made from wood or metal. The vessels on a table depended on what a household owned. Pottery, wood, metal, and bread itself could all help contain and serve food. The most common medieval spoons in many European households were probably wooden. Yet wooden spoons survive poorly, unless preserved in unusual conditions. Wood decays, leaving far fewer examples than metal. A gentle old word for small household objects made from wood is treen. Bowls, cups, plates, boxes, and spoons could all be treen. Such objects once filled ordinary homes. Even though many have disappeared, other spoons were made from horn, bone, pewter, brass, and silver. Pewter is a tin-based alloy. Historical formulas varied, and some included lead, so old pewter should not automatically be judged by modern safety standards. At a medieval table, however, polished pewter could offer a muted, silvery surface, catching candlelight without the bright gleam of precious metal. Silver stood apart because it had value beyond its practical use. A silver spoon could be weighed, inherited, taxed, sold, or pawned. It might appear in a household inventory, a written list of possessions. Inventories often tell us more about precious metal than about common wood. Silver was recorded because it represented wealth. A wooden spoon might be too ordinary to mention, even if the household used it every day. The written record therefore leans toward the valuable. The objects listed most carefully were not necessarily the objects used most frequently. Some travelers and guests carried a personal knife and spoon. A spoon could be tucked into a pouch or kept in a case, ready for a meal away from home. This was practical where hosts did not provide a complete individual setting. Yet not everyone carried a spoon, and not every journey required one. The custom varied by time, place, and circumstance. Now allow the scene to widen toward the medieval Islamic world, which stretched across highly varied societies from Iberia and North Africa to Western and Central Asia. Written sources describe sophisticated kitchens, syrups, sweets, medicines, and detailed table manners. Bread and the right hand were important in many dining settings. Spoons and ladles also existed, serving liquids, cooking, medicine, and particular dishes. There is no contradiction in this. A meal may invite several methods at once. Trade networks carried spices, ceramics, glass, metalwork, and luxury goods over long distances. Ports and market towns brought people and materials into contact. Yet dining customs did not move in one simple direction, nor did every community adopt the same habits. Imagine a wooden bowl resting on a trestle table. Bread lies nearby, ready to absorb warm broth. A pewter spoon catches the wavering light. Somewhere else, a silver utensil is counted and placed carefully into storage. Elsewhere again, a traveler closes a pouch around a plain personal spoon. These are all medieval tables, though they belong to different lives. Social differences were visible in material. A wealthy household might display finely decorated silver. A modest household might rely upon carved wood, horn, pottery, and a small number of shared serving tools. But a plain spoon could be made with care, and a precious one could be used rather than merely displayed. The spoon remained what it had long been, a practical object shaped by food, vessel, custom, and means. Once a spoon was entered into an inventory, inherited, or saved as a valuable possession, it also became more than a tool. It became stored wealth, evidence of craft, and sometimes a gift. So our attention turns from the table to the workshop, where wood grain, softened horn, cast pewter, brass, and silver, each asked for a different kind of patience. Chapter 6. Craft, Status, and the Gift of a Spoon. Before a spoon can rest beside a bowl, someone must make it. The making begins with material. Each material sets its own limits and offers its own possibilities. Wood follows grain. Horn softens with heat. Pewter flows into a mold. Brass and silver respond to hammer, file, and polish. For much of history, wooden spoons were probably among the most familiar. To watch one being carved is to watch a shape emerge gradually. A knife removes the outer material, revealing the handle and the swelling form of the bowl. A gouge or curved hollowing tool works into the center. Fine curls gather upon the bench. The scent of newly cut wood rises softly into the workshop. Each cut follows the one before it. A spoon maker must pay attention to grain, the direction in which the fibers of wood run. Grain affects strength, smoothness, and the chance of splitting. If the fibers continue along the handle, the spoon is better able to withstand years of stirring and lifting. The maker turns the wood in the hand, examining the lines. A thumb follows the grain. The tool moves with those fibers rather than forcing its way against them. Fresh wood, often called green wood, is usually easier to carve than fully seasoned wood. It still contains moisture and yields more readily to a blade. A maker may shape the spoon while the wood is green, then allow it to dry gradually. Not every wooden spoon was turned on a lathe. In fact, many were carved. A lathe spins a piece of wood and is naturally suited to circular forms, such as bowls and cups. The uneven form of a spoon, with a long handle leading into a hollow, lends itself well to hand carving. Once the basic form is complete, finishing begins. The surface may be scraped and sanded. It may be burnished, which means smoothed and polished through rubbing. Burnishing presses down small fibers and gives the wood a soft sheen. Food-safe oil may then be applied, deepening the color and helping the surface resist moisture. The finished spoon feels warmer in the hand than metal. Its contact with pottery is soft and muted. Over time, its edges may become smoother still. Horn requires another method. It can be cut and then heated until it becomes pliable. Warm horn may be pressed into a mold, allowed to cool, trimmed, and polished. Horn is not melted like metal. Its shaping depends on softening and pressure. The resulting spoon can be thin, smooth, and lightly translucent. Pewter behaves differently. Because this tin-based alloy melts at a relatively low temperature, it can be poured into molds. An alloy is a material made by combining a metal with one or more other elements. Historical pewter recipes varied, and some contained lead. Brass is an alloy principally of copper and zinc. It can be cast and worked into durable utensils, offering a warm golden tone unlike the pale surface of pewter. It can be cast, hammered, raised from sheet, filed, engraved, and polished. A silversmith may shape a bowl over a curved form, refine the handle, smooth the edges, and bring the whole object to a bright finish. A specialized spoon maker was sometimes called a spooner, though historical terminology varied from place to place. On a precious metal spoon, small stamped marks may appear. These are hallmarks. A hallmark can identify aspects of purity, the maker, the place where the metal was tested, and sometimes the date. The test of a precious metal's composition or purity is called an assay. An assay office examines the metal, and approved marks provide a compact record pressed directly into the spoon. Imagine the brief pressure of the stamp. A tiny sign appears in silver, clear enough to outlast the hand that made it. Silver spoons were practical utensils, but they also stored value. A household could use them, pass them to children, sell them, or pawn them in difficult times. Their value made them suitable as gifts. In some communities, spoons became associated with baptisms, weddings, hospitality, and family milestones. A small spoon wrapped in linen might mark a beginning or express affection. Such customs were meaningful, but they were not universal. Among the best-known decorative gift spoons were apostle spoons, fashionable in late medieval and early modern England. Their handles ended in small figures of Christ, the Virgin, or one of the apostles. These figures formed the finial, the decorative end of the handle. The spoon combined practical form with a miniature sculpture. Apostle spoons might be given at baptism or on another occasion. They could be owned singly or as sets. Not every set contained exactly 12, and not every apostle spoon was a christening gift. An elaborate spoon did not necessarily belong to royalty. Merchants, prosperous households, religious institutions, and others might own decorated silver. Some pieces were kept carefully. Others were used at the table, acquiring fine scratches and softened details. From the association between silver and privilege comes the familiar phrase, born with a silver spoon in one's mouth. It describes someone born into inherited wealth or advantage. Its precise origin should not be tied too confidently to one particular gift custom. Still, the phrase reveals how closely a material could become linked with social position. A wooden spoon and a silver spoon may perform the same simple action, lifting food from a bowl, yet they carry different meanings. One may speak of local material and daily work. The other may serve as a utensil, a store of value, a gift, and a sign of status all at once. Both pass through human hands. Both acquire wear. Both answer the need to scoop, stir, or serve. As workshops refined these old materials, tables were changing too. Tea, coffee, cocoa, sugar, and new patterns of dining brought small practical questions. How should sugar be lifted? How might powdered sweetness be sifted? What shape reaches into a narrow space? What spoon is large enough to serve a shared dish? From those questions, new forms began to gather around the table. Chapter 7. New Foods, New Shapes. There comes a point in the history of many useful objects when one general form begins to divide into many specialized forms. A spoon that once performed almost every task gains companions. One is made smaller for a cup, another grows broader for serving, a third is pierced with holes, a fourth becomes long and narrow, designed to reach where an ordinary spoon cannot. This multiplication happened gradually. It did not arrive at every table at the same time. From the early modern period onward, elite European dining increasingly emphasized coordinated place settings, ordered courses, specialized serving pieces, and written etiquette. Wealthy households might arrange utensils according to the sequence of a meal. Etiquette means accepted expectations for polite behavior. Manuals described how an ideal table should be set and how diners ought to use its objects. But manuals show ideals, not necessarily ordinary life. Many households continued to use simple, mixed, inherited or handmade utensils. A single spoon could still stir a drink, serve a dish, and accompany dessert. Changing foods and drinks encouraged some of the newer forms. Tea, coffee, cocoa, sugar, and spices reached European markets through global trade and colonial systems. They became connected with hospitality, conversation, and formal social rituals. Their spread was also tied to imperial power, plantation economies, exploited labor, and enslavement. A plantation economy relied on large-scale crop production and historically often depended upon coerced or enslaved workers. The sweetness placed in a cup could therefore carry a distant and difficult history. That truth need not be turned into decoration. It can simply be acknowledged before we return to the objects on the table. As tea drinking expanded, the teaspoon became increasingly familiar. It rested beside a cup, ready to stir sugar or retrieve a stray leaf. Early teaspoons were not necessarily the same size as modern measuring teaspoons. The name described a use, not a fixed volume. One maker's teaspoon could differ from another's. Later formal sets might include coffee spoons, often smaller than teaspoons, and suited to small cups. Imagine tea leaves unfolding in hot water. Sugar falls from a spoon and disappears beneath the surface. A slow circle forms, widens, and becomes still. The spoon returns to its saucer with a light tap. Sugar acquired other utensils as well. A sugar spoon might have a broad or shell-shaped bowl, making it easy to lift loose crystals. A sifter spoon had a perforated bowl. With a gentle shake, powdered sugar passed through the small holes and settled over food in a fine layer. Salt had its own tiny spoon. Salt was often kept in an open container called a salt cellar. A salt spoon could lift a small amount without requiring fingers to enter the dish. These little utensils were practical, though they also became part of formal display. Serving spoons answered a broader need. Larger than individual eating spoons, they transferred food from a shared dish to a plate or bowl. A serving spoon might move through soft custard, cooked vegetables, grain, or stew. Its size made it an object of hospitality. It carried food outward from the center of the table. Some specialized spoons answered very narrow problems. The marrow spoon became fashionable in Britain around the late 17th and 18th centuries. It was designed to reach marrow within long bones. Some forms were narrow, and some had differently sized ends. Its shape follows its purpose closely. A broad, ordinary spoon cannot enter a narrow space, so the bowl becomes long and slim. In the kitchen, the basting spoon solved another problem. It had a long handle, keeping the cook's hand farther from heat. It lifted hot fat or cooking juices and poured them back over roasting food. Basting means moistening food with fat or juices while it cooks. The motion is repetitive and patient. The spoon dips, rises, pours, and returns. Dessert spoons eventually took a place between tablespoons and teaspoons in many settings. Soup spoons often developed deeper or more rounded bowls, though traditions differed. No one soup spoon shape became universal. Punch ladles used a deep bowl and long handle to serve from a larger vessel. They were made from silver, wood, shell, and other materials. The handle reached across the bowl while the deep scoop carried liquid into waiting cups. Other specialized forms appeared in particular sets and places. Some were widely used, others belonged mainly to formal households or fashionable dining. It would be misleading to imagine that every home possessed a spoon for every dish. Specialized tableware required money, storage, and a style of dining that rewarded variety. For many people, one well-made spoon remained enough. Matching sets helped create the idea that every course might have a dedicated utensil. Placement rules became increasingly detailed, especially during the 18th and 19th centuries. Spoons could be arranged according to the order in which they were expected to be used. Yet even at the most formal table, each design remained a miniature solution to a practical question. A pierced bowl sifts, a long handle reaches, a deep bowl holds liquid, a broad one serves. The variety does not represent an inevitable march toward improvement. It reflects changing foods, social customs, trade, wealth, and fashion. Picture these spoons resting together in a cabinet. A tiny salt spoon lies beside an open cellar. A sugar spoon has the curve of a shell. A sifter bowl is patterned with small holes. A serving spoon waits near a dish. A long ladle leans against the side of a vessel. Each has its quiet purpose. And with so many forms came another question. Could spoons be made in matching patterns, in greater numbers, with less time spent on each individual object? That question leads away from the small bench of a silversmith and toward the measured rise and fall of machinery. Chapter 8. industry, and the everyday spoon. For much of the history we have followed, making a metal spoon required substantial hand labor. Metal might be cast, hammered, filed, shaped, engraved, and polished. Every stage required skill and time. Two spoons made by the same worker could differ slightly in weight, curve, or decoration. Such differences were not necessarily flaws. They were the natural traces of human eyes and hands. During the 18th and 19th centuries, workshops increasingly introduced machinery into spoon production. Rolling mills produced sheets of metal with a more even thickness. From these sheets, rough spoon shapes could be cut. Such a roughly formed piece is called a blank. A blank already suggests the object it will become, but its bowl has not yet reached full depth, and its handle may still need shaping and decoration. Workers placed blanks into dies. A die is a hard-shaped tool used to cut or press softer material. Under pressure, the metal took on a more precise outline or pattern. Drop hammers and presses rose and fell at a measured pace. The same design could be repeated, with far greater consistency than before. Rows of similar blanks reflected the workshop light. Mechanical polishing reduced some of the long labor required to brighten metal. Division of labor allowed different workers to specialize. One might prepare blanks. Another might stamp them. Others shaped bowls, ground edges, plated surfaces, polished, packed, or sold the finished goods. Mechanization reduced production time and made matching sets easier to create. Yet the human hand did not disappear. Hand finishing remained important, especially for high-quality utensils. A stamped spoon might still need its edge smoothed, its bowl corrected, and its surface carefully polished. Machine work and skilled handwork existed together. An important form of silvered metal appeared in 18th century England. Sheffield plate is traditionally associated with Thomas Bolsover, around 1742. Sheffield plate was made by fusing a thin layer of silver to a base metal, usually copper. The joined material was then rolled and shaped. Because silver and copper were bonded before the object was formed, the method differed from later electroplating. The finished surface offered the appearance and some of the qualities of silver while using less precious metal. This allowed silvered tableware to reach more households, although it did not make such goods affordable to everyone. In the 19th century, electroplating became commercially important. Work associated with George and Henry Elkington in Britain helped develop its commercial use, though the technology grew from several experiments and improvements rather than one isolated invention. Electroplating uses an electric current to deposit a thin layer of metal onto another material. A base metal spoon could receive a coating of silver, creating a bright surface over a less expensive core. Silver-plated spoons are not solid silver. Their precious metal layer is thin, and over years of use, it may wear away from raised areas. Several alloys served as bases for plating. Nickel silver contains copper, nickel, and zinc. Despite its name, it ordinarily contains no actual silver. Its pale color made it useful for tableware and for objects that would later be plated. Britannia metal is a tin-rich alloy. It was used for cast tableware and as a base for plating. These materials carried brightness on their surfaces while remaining quite different from solid silver beneath. Industrial production helped coordinated cutlery reach a broader public. The change was gradual, not immediate. Handmade spoons, inherited utensils, wooden cooking tools, second-hand pieces, and unmatched sets remained common. Many household drawers grew slowly. One spoon came from a relative. Another was purchased to replace a lost piece. Several belonged to an older pattern. A newer set joined them years later. The result was not perfect uniformity, but a useful gathering of objects. Catalogs and department stores encouraged the purchase of matching sets. Mail-order businesses allowed people to select patterns from a distance. Wedding gift customs helped make complete services desirable. Manufacturers gave patterns names, allowing customers to order replacements and additions over time. A household could begin with a few pieces and gradually expand. Finished spoons might be arranged in velvet-lined cases, each resting in its own place, yet most soon left the case and entered ordinary use. They stirred tea, served food, and gathered scratches. Sheffield became strongly associated with cutlery, though it was never the only production center. Spoon manufacture involved designers, die cutters, stampers, grinders, platers, polishers, packers, and sales workers. Factory work could be noisy and dusty. Hours were often long, and conditions were uneven. The smooth spoon resting quietly upon a table concealed a complicated chain of labor. It is worth remembering those workers, without dwelling too heavily on the difficulties of the workshop. Many hands stood behind each repeated pattern, just as many hands had once stood behind each individually hammered spoon. Industry changed the scale of production. It made consistency easier. It broadened ownership and encouraged the idea of a coordinated table. But it did not erase older materials or habits. A wooden spoon still moved through a cooking pot. A worn silver spoon remained in a family. An unmatched plated spoon served perfectly well beside newer pieces. The old and new shared the same drawer. By the early 20th century, another transformation was beginning. Silver and plate remained, but stainless steel would become increasingly familiar. Aluminum would travel lightly. Plastics would bring color and disposability. The spoon's form was ready to enter cafeterias, hospitals, campsites, nurseries, aircraft, schools, and kitchens in materials its earliest makers could never have imagined. Chapter 9. Modern Materials and Many Purposes. During the 20th century, the everyday spoon became increasingly durable and easy to care for. It could be washed and dried without polishing. It could pass through busy kitchens, cafeterias, hospitals, and family homes. Much of this change came from stainless steel. Stainless steel is not one single material, but a family of iron-based alloys. These alloys contain enough chromium to form a thin protective surface layer. Chromium is a metallic element. When present in suitable amounts, it helps the steel resist corrosion, the gradual chemical deterioration of a material. Rust is one familiar form of corrosion. The protective layer on stainless steel is extremely thin. It greatly improves resistance to rust, though it does not make the metal completely stain-proof. Under harsh conditions, stainless steel can still mark, pit, or corrode. For ordinary table use, however, it is durable and relatively easy to clean. Harry Brearley's work in Sheffield in 1913 is often credited as an important step in developing stainless steel for cutlery. Yet stainless alloys emerged through the work of several researchers in different countries. As with the spoon itself, there was no need to place the whole story in one person's hands. Stainless steel tableware became increasingly common through the 20th century. It did not require the repeated polishing of silver. It could be produced in matching sets, withstand regular washing, and remain useful for many years. Besides steel came aluminum, a metal valued for lightness. Aluminum was once expensive because separating it from ore was difficult. In 1886, Charles Martin Hall and Paul Héroult independently developed the electrolytic process, now known by both their names. Electrolysis uses electricity to drive a chemical process. The Hall-Héroult method helped make large-scale aluminum production practical. Aluminum spoons are light in the hand. They became useful for travel, camping, military kits, and institutional dining. A spoon nested inside a metal cup adds very little weight to a pack. Aluminum is softer than many stainless steels, so it may scratch, bend, or dent more readily. Still, its lightness gives it a practical place. 20th century plastics brought another set of possibilities. Spoons could be molded rapidly in many colors and shapes. They could be translucent or opaque, rigid or slightly flexible, full-sized or made for very small hands. Disposable spoons accompanied takeaway food, picnics, hospitals, air travel, tastings, and large events. They offered convenience where washing and storage were difficult. That convenience also created waste concerns. Single-use plastic can remain in the environment for a long time. Alternatives include reusable utensils and disposable spoons made from wood, bamboo, paper composites, plant-derived plastics. Yet environmental comparisons are not simple. Reusable objects require material and energy to manufacture. They also need water and energy for cleaning. Compostable plastics often break down only under particular industrial conditions. Biodegradable does not mean that an object disappears quickly in every environment. Durability and frequency of reuse matter. So do local systems for washing, collecting, composting, and disposal. The question is not answered by material alone. It depends on the full life of the object. Open a modern kitchen drawer, and the variety becomes clear. There may be measuring spoons, touching together with a light metallic chime. These are sold in standardized sets for cooking. Yet standards vary by place. A metric teaspoon is commonly 5 milliliters. A metric tablespoon is commonly 15 milliliters. In Australia, a standard tablespoon is commonly 20 milliliters. Historical household spoons should not be assumed to hold these exact volumes. Even modern eating teaspoons vary. An ordinary household teaspoon should not be used to measure medicine. A marked oral syringe is often more accurate for liquid medicine. An infant spoon may have a small, shallow, rounded bowl. Modern versions may use soft silicone or plastic, offering a gentle surface for a young child. A medicine spoon may be marked for volume, though purpose-made measuring devices can provide greater accuracy. An ice cream scoop may have a deep bowl, a release mechanism, or a heat-conductive handle. Its rounded shape helps form a curl or sphere from a dense frozen surface. A grapefruit spoon has a pointed or serrated edge designed to separate fruit segments. A long sundae or iced tea spoon reaches the bottom of a tall glass. A camping utensil may fold or nest. Some combine more than one function. The spork brings spoon and fork forms together. Hybrid utensils existed before the modern popularity of the word, though the name is now widely familiar. Small tasting spoons appear in culinary work and at food samples. Some are reusable, while others are disposable. Each of these modern variations repeats an old pattern. Shape follows use. A long handle reaches. A soft bowl feeds gently. A serrated edge separates. A measured bowl portions. A folding handle saves space. Hygiene also influences material and design. Smooth, non-porous utensils are generally easier to clean thoroughly than cracked or deeply scratched surfaces. Non-porous means that the material lacks tiny openings that readily absorb liquid. No utensil is automatically sterile. Wooden spoons can be used safely when properly cleaned and dried. Wood is neither perfectly germ-free nor inherently dangerous. Like any kitchen tool, it depends on care and condition. Shared serving utensils can reduce direct hand contact with food, but cleanliness still depends on how they are handled and washed. Near a quiet sink, stainless steel spoons dry beside a wooden cooking spoon. A silicone infant spoon rests upon a cloth. Measuring spoons hang together on a ring. In a travel bag, a light camping spoon waits inside a cup. Modern materials have multiplied, but the familiar curve remains. After all these alloys and specialized designs, we return to one household, where many centuries of spoon history may lie together in a single drawer. Chapter 10. The Spoon Beside Us. And so, after shells and gourds, carved wood and shaped bone, bronze, silver, steel, aluminum, ceramic, and plastic, we come back to the room where we began. The evening is quiet. A spoon rests beside a cup or bowl, catching the last gentle light of the day. If you open a household drawer, you may find several layers of spoon history gathered together. There are factory-made stainless steel spoons, durable and familiar. There may be inherited silver or silver plate. A wooden cooking spoon stands in a jar near the stove. A ceramic soup spoon rests farther back in the drawer. A small plastic or silicone spoon belongs to a child. A light travel utensil waits for the next journey. These objects do not form one single tradition. They come from different materials, customs, and purposes. Yet they share the recurring idea of a small vessel made easy to hold. The stainless steel spoon may be the most ordinary. Its pattern was stamped or pressed, repeated many times. It needs no regular silver polishing. It passes quietly from meal to sink and back to the drawer. Its surface carries signs of use. Fine scratches cross the bowl where it has touched plates and ceramic dishes. The marks are small, visible only when light falls at the right angle. An older silver spoon may show a different surface. Silver tarnish forms mainly when the metal reacts with sulfur-containing compounds in the environment. Tarnish is not the same as rust. Rust is associated with iron, while silver develops its own dark surface film. A polishing cloth can remove tarnish and return brightness to the metal, though repeated polishing should always be done with care. On a silver-plated spoon, raised areas may show where the thin silver layer has worn away. The crest of a pattern, the edge of a handle, or the curve of a bowl may reveal the base metal beneath. An engraved initial may have softened until it is almost smooth. It is tempting to invent a complete story for such an object. We may imagine every table where it rested, every hand that held it, and every occasion it witnessed. But an old spoon does not give us all those details. Unless records survive, much of its personal history remains unknown. It can still hold emotional meaning. It may have belonged to someone remembered with affection. It may have been saved because a family considered it important. We do not need to invent what we cannot know. Sometimes the honest story is enough. The spoon was made, it was used, someone kept it. Eventually it was passed along. Nearby, a wooden spoon may be drying upright in a jar. Its edges have softened. Its bowl has darkened through contact with oils, heat, pigments, and repeated washing. Tomato, berries, spices, or years of stirring may have changed its color. A thumb may naturally settle into a polished place on the handle. The grain remains visible beneath the surface. Wooden spoons require ordinary care. They should be cleaned and allowed to dry. If deeply cracked or damaged, they may need to be replaced. But well cared for, they can serve for a long time. Their sound against a pot is soft. Their handles remain comfortable near heat. They connect the modern kitchen with an ancient material, whose history is much greater than the number of surviving examples suggests. A ceramic spoon offers another texture. It is cool, glazed, and often deep bowled. It meets a ceramic bowl with a bright little chime. A child's silicone spoon is matte and soft. A folding camping utensil is light and compact. A set of measuring spoons touches together on a ring. The drawer contains history not as a neat sequence, but as coexistence. Silver did not vanish when plating appeared. Wood did not disappear when steel became common. Ceramic continued beside metal. Hands, bread, chopsticks, forks, knives, and bowls continued beside all of them. Different tools suit different foods. Different customs give those tools different meanings. Spoons appear beyond the household as well. They are present in cafes, schools, hospitals, religious gatherings, community meals, and soup kitchens. They belong to routine and care. A cook tastes broth. A server portions food. Someone stirs sugar into a warm drink. A parent offers a small spoonful to a child. A person measures an ingredient. A ladle moves through a shared pot. The continuity of the spoon lies not in one completely unchanged design, but in recurring actions: lifting, stirring, portioning, measuring, serving, feeding, sharing. There was no single spoon from which every later spoon descended. Spoon-like tools probably arose independently in many societies. Their materials and forms answered local foods, vessels, customs, and resources. A shell might serve with little alteration. A piece of green wood could be carved. Clay could be shaped and fired. Metal could be cast, hammered, plated, or stamped. Plastic could be molded. Silicone could be made soft enough for a child. Across these differences, the practical need returned again and again. Still, this does not mean that every dining tradition is the same. Shared needs coexist with real cultural differences. Eating with the hands is not an incomplete form of eating with utensils. Chopsticks are not a step before or after spoons. Bread, bowls, forks, knives, ladles, and spoons each perform work suited to a particular meal. No one shape is ideal for every food. A deep bowl carries broth well. A broad spoon serves. A narrow spoon reaches. A pierced spoon sifts. A long handle keeps the hand away from heat. A short handle rests comfortably beside a small bowl. Each design is an answer, not a final conclusion. Now let the drawer close softly on all these layers of history. Return to the single spoon beside the evening cup. Steam rises in a thin, wavering line. The room is growing dim. You lift the spoon and feel its familiar weight settle into your hand. If it is metal, it begins cool and slowly grows warm. If it is wood, it already feels quiet and gentle against the fingers. The spoon enters the drink. One slow circle moves across the surface. Then another. A faint ring of motion reaches the sides of the cup and returns inward. Sugar, milk, or honey blends into the whole. Reflected lamplight bends along the spoon's curved bowl, making the familiar room appear small and distant within it. Then the stirring slows. The surface grows calm. The spoon rises, and for a moment a single drop gathers at its edge before returning to the cup. You place the spoon upon the saucer. There is a soft tap, then stillness. Its work for the evening is finished. The spoon rests beside the cup, unremarkable and complete. It belongs to the present, but its principle reaches far into the past, through workshops and kitchens, roads and markets, quiet homes and shared meals. It does not remember those places. Its worn surface and useful form are enough. The last reflection fades from the curve of the bowl. The wooden spoon near the sink dries in the quiet air. The drawer is closed. The room settles, and the small spoon remains at rest, as you may rest now, easy and untroubled, while the long history of ordinary things grows still around you.